If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm gonna get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may.
Welcome to another episode of The School Without Walls. I'm Antonio Hobbs, founder and host of this educational program. The date is October the 9th, 2013. Before I introduce my guests, I want to talk a little bit about the goals of The School Without Walls. We want to train young African Americans, mainly those from 7 to about 25, the importance of good work ethics, teaching that they have a moral duty and obligation to obtain and maintain a system of moral values that would lead them to economic success. We have too many youngsters that are losing their lives, in our opinion, due to the lack of proper training, early training. Moral values, we mean the danger of unwitted pregnancies. That's killing us. Theft, murder, the importance of being connected to a higher power we call God, by way of the church. Have them to understand that all people are not college material, but yet all people can be economically successful. Teach them the importance of trade schools, business planning. Teach them how to obtain wealth or a career with just a good high school education. Teach them good conversational skills and techniques. We call that standard English. Teach them the importance of understanding non-verbal expressions. The way we act so often in a negative way prevents us from being successful. Teach them that the surest and safest way out of poverty to economic success is a good education, be that college or trade school, but we need something beyond our 12 years of education. We're living in a period of specialization, and there's plenty of work to be done if you're prepared and willing to do the work. My guest today is a young man, William Lawson, student here at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. So glad to have you. I
talked with him
a few days ago, and he was very impressive. You're a very impressive young man.
Well, thank
for 30 years.
Yes, sir.
30 years, a lot of wisdom. Tell me, were you born here in Pine Bluff?
I was born here in Pine Bluff, yes, sir.
Okay, let's talk a little bit, if you will, about your upbringing, parents and so grandparents, whatever.
Yes, sir.
Were you raised by grandparents, parents?
I was raised by my grandparents mostly.
Mm-hmm.
They always kept me around. My mom had a little trouble early on in life adjusting, and she didn't really show up full time till about I was the age of 12 or 13.
Gotcha.
By that time, my grandparents had already taught me enough to make a man of myself, so it was smooth sailing from there in a way.
That is amazing. I have a book before me called, the title is The Children Should Know Their Grandparents.
Yes.
And it talks about the importance of grandparents in the lives of, and I'm going to deal more with that with the ministers, but you're a good example of the role the grandparents played, whereas today a lot of the grandparents are not mature enough to raise themselves because they're only 30.
Correct.
You see what I'm saying? But
Yes,
your grandparents were grown adults, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's one of the problems, the sins that has come upon our nation, especially on the African American race, is babies having babies, and you cannot survive very long when the majority of the people come into the world that way.
Correct. You can't survive if everybody's younger. You need the wisdom of the older people.
You got to have it.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Continue. You finished high school here in the city, did you?
Yes, sir. I graduated in 2002 from Watson Chapel, and right after I graduated, it wasn't 2 weeks later, I was in boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois.
What happened? You went to service. A lot of youngsters your age went to college, but you decided to go to the Navy, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
Why did you do that?
Well, September 9/11, 2001. I was a senior in high school when that happened. I remember it even freshly today. But when that happened, I knew that I'm coming into my own. It's time for me to be a man, and I wanted to do something that will make a statement, not only to Pine Bluff or Arkansas, but to the world that I am becoming a man and I want to defend my country.
How long were you in service, and where did you travel? Where did you go?
I was in service for 2 years and 10 months. I was stationed on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. That we were on the East Coast Fleet. And the East Coast Fleet is the one that goes to, you know, the Middle East and that area. So we toured around that area.
What are some of the countries you remember, like Japan or?
No, sir. It was basically what I was doing for reasons unbeknownst to me. The good Lord decided to put me on a ship that didn't have any ammunition. It was a 25-year refurbishment period. What that means is everything that's on the inside, they take out, fix, and return it to fleet. So I helped return the Dwight D. Eisenhower to the fleet.
How about that? So now, you didn't go abroad then, right? You
No,
stayed
sir.
in the USA.
The furthest I went was to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
I be done. Okay, well, that was God's work, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you returned from the Navy, and talk to us a little bit about what you're 23 now. When you come from the Navy, about 23.
I was 21.
21 years old,
Yes,
just getting chronologically grown. You had been to the Navy, right?
Correct.
We have 2 minutes before this break. What can you say about what happened after that?
Well, after I got out, there was still a few loose ends I wanted to tie up. I wanted to go and experience my actual biological father's side of the family, and that helped me on my road to where I am today as well. But it was basically just getting the knowledge to prepare myself to be a leader.
Where did your biological father live at that time?
He's from Dallas.
Oh, you went to Dallas.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, how many siblings do you have?
Well, my father has several children, but my mother only had me and my younger sister. She's 15 now.
You've only interacted with this younger sister, right?
Correct.
Okay, we're going to stop for station break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes with Mr. William Lawson.
There are a million places you'd never consider texting. So why would you do it while driving? Leave risky driving to the professionals. Stop the texts, and together we can stop the wrecks.
Those of you who have just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host of this educational program, and my guest here is Mr. William Lawson, who's an artist in his own right. We're going to talk about some of his work called the spoken word. But before we do that, what is your church affiliation?
Well, I was born and raised here in Pine Bluff. I was also born and raised in St. John AME Church.
You were, huh?
Yes, sir. We went from Reverend Strong to Reverend Norfolk, and now Reverend Smith is our pastor.
Okay.
And I feel like it took God the time to take me out to give me the knowledge to come back, and he positioned our pastors there. You're an associate pastor as well. He positioned all this, I feel, for the purposes that we're here to serve today.
That's amazing. I think that's very, very deep what you just said. Now let's talk a little bit about the spoken word. I've heard some of your writings, and let's hear some of them, whatever you have.
Okay, well, I've transitioned myself from being just a youngster to where I am today, and my latest persona in the artistic profession is Gino Monet.
Gino Monet.
Yes.
Now, what is that, a name or terminology?
It's the word nous, which is to know. And I broke it down to G period, and there's an N-O in the middle, and there's a $sign at the end.
Gino.
Because knowledge is worth more than any gold.
How about that? Knowledge is
there's
power.
no money that can compare to what I have to bestow upon anybody that's willing to listen.
You got that right. It's power. All right, we proceed.
Okay. Understand this and then seek for deeper meaning. No moves by faith, I don't need a reason. I got a role and a path to fill my mission, a fisher amongst men, and I ain't even into fishing. Listen, our city needs an intervention, and during that program, don't leave it intermission. Dig it if you get it, grow it if you sow it. You're blessed with a soul even if you don't know it. My pistons are firing because I'm flyer than all designer things. Flexing the muscle I rep for the king. Conquer the gold, I know what it means. And I'm moving, the feel of the melody got me grooving. Deep into it, making my way as I'm making my music. For my movement, the ones I make moves with. Do it and does it well, so don't confuse it. That's just the beginning.
That's the end of that one?
Well, it's a 10-page piece. I've been working on it. It contains...
Well, let's talk a bit about this piece and move it some more. Now, to the older generation, what have you just said now? The youngsters got it just like that, but what in essence of what do you just recite?
To the older generation, I've basically taken some of the principles and things that you've heard talked about in the Bible and put it in a way where our younger generation would understand it.
And would get their attention too. That's another key. That gets their attention, because it's difficult, Brother Boyd, to teach anybody if you can't get their attention. Is that right? That's the first order of business, is attracting their attention.
Correct.
That's why those of us who understand what you are doing can appreciate it.
Right.
You may continue with that or another piece. That's up to you.
Well,
You're
you're
displaying your art here.
I had a song that's been going around the internet for a while, and it's kind of deep to me. It has a bridge in it where it says, "I gotta get it, Daddy. Paper is a habit, Daddy. Why you think you see the pastor in a brand new caddy? When half the congregation is living out here badly, you done left 2 or 3 mamas. That ain't very manly. And I done learned from Nanny. Mama turned her nose up at me, said I gotta live right, but she can't see what's happening. And I done killed myself thinking I could play it grown. My auntie said, you man enough, and take your butt home." And that's what I did.
Okay, all right, okay. Got another one, go with it. Remember, this is your time.
I can continue this one.
Okay, let's continue that one then.
Okay, and where I stopped off. This is for my movement, the ones I make moves with. Do it and does it well and don't confuse it with other music, obsessed by packages that they sell, chalked with all the other trappings that life entails. Now we know very well about all the hell in there, because after the first 10 albums it was very clear. So from 1996 to whenever this hit your ears, you've been living a lie, but now the real is here. Yeah, that boy ill in here. That's what Nos personifies. Been real all my life and I can't live a lie. Do it like it's televised. Live in my broadcast. Long as God with me, sunny days my forecast. Somewhere in the future, I step outside of time. What is eternity in your frame of mind? Could you think to dream or even imagine that? Unless you're atheist and this world's your habitat. You keep the here and now, I'm prepping for forever. You trying to look good and stack a little cheddar. I can't knock the hustle, but I'm not one of you. How can I when I rep the one above you?
Oh, that's something else. Very good, very good. Let me ask you some things now. My concern is the problems we're having today. You have some very serious problems. Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir, I'm very aware.
In your opinion, what in the world is happening to Western civilization to cause us to have so many problems?
We're a nation of follow the leader.
Follow the leader.
And the thing is, we don't know exactly who that leader is, where he's coming from, or who he's serving.
I see.
Yes, sir.
But in follow the leader, if you have a positive leader, that's good, isn't it?
Well, it can be good.
If it's a good, positive person, if you follow.
Let's take Martin Luther King Jr., for example.
Okay.
Great leader, outstanding leader. I would never think to say anything bad about Martin Luther King Jr. for all that he's done. But at the same time, in the beginning of his career, he was a puppet. He was led by several different organizations and people who were in his ear saying, you have a good message, let's put you here, let's have you there. But instead of saying this, why don't you say what we have prepared for you? Now, the longer he went in his career and the more he actually started gaining knowledge and wisdom and understanding, he started thinking a little bit more like Malcolm X.
Came into his own, right?
Yes, sir. And when he came into his own, Malcolm X at the same time was pulling away from the Nation of Islam and going on his own. And when they started coming together, lights out.
Okay, we have to break in a few minutes. When we come back, I want you to discuss, for the sake of the community, the difference between Malcolm X, if you have that knowledge, and Dr. King, and also compare Dr. King's philosophy with that of Booker T. Washington. You familiar with Booker T. Washington? Do you have any knowledge of Booker T?
I have a little bit. I've been reading more on W.E.B. Du Bois
and I want to say
recently.
those two had a kind of difference of opinion.
Yes.
Booker T. Washington and Du Bois. When we come back in just a few minutes. Okay.
How did UAPB prepare me? The agriculture program. At the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, it is very hands-on. They teach us how to use the technology and the tools of today's industry. Career Services helped me obtain 2 internships, and that provided me the opportunities to travel to different places like the Florida Everglades, where I practice conservation work. Opportunities like that also taught me just how many different jobs I can do with my degree. I'll be working with the USDA as a soil conservationist. That is how UAPB prepared me.
Those of you who just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host of this educational program called The School Without Walls. My guest is Mr. William Lawson, a young man who's an artist. He's done a lot of writing. For 30 years, he's traveled a lot. On the other side of the break, we were talking about the different ideologies of 2 men, 2 popular men, I think, 2 great men.
Correct.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. All right, let's talk about the difference between the 2, although they go in the same direction.
It was very different. Malcolm X grew up under a father who was a preacher, just like Martin Luther King Jr. did. The only difference is Martin Luther King Jr. stayed in the church, where Malcolm X, his father died and his mother went out of her mind, so he was sent off somewhere. So he had to go from basically not having a family unit, no grandparents, no nothing, and he was just trying to survive like we are today. A lot of the kids come up in that thing, but they get lost and stuck where Malcolm X had his turning point. And Malcolm X was in jail when he received the blessings from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to become the minister that he grew to be. Whereas Martin Luther King Jr. had his congregation and his church, and he had the SLCC, I believe.
Right, that was after he became an adult, but he had the nurturing as a child all the way through, didn't he? He had
Right.
nurturing,
Yes.
whereas the other man did not.
Right.
Then later he did have this organization.
Right.
And
they came into their own around the 50s and 60s. Now, this was a turbulent time in America, and it really changed things a lot, because whereas white America was seeing the things that was going on in America, the experience from Black America was different.
yeah.
We had the church to bring us in, and everybody was so on point with dressing to the T and looking their best and presenting their best. Whereas white America was like, turn off, tune out, let's go play in a park somewhere. So
2 different worlds. Right?
yes, sir.
I think it's very important for us, if we're going to understand the now, we have to have a knowledge of the history,
Right.
where we've come from.
If you don't know where you're coming from, you're doomed to repeat the past.
That is so true.
That's why I've done so much studying on the past and can understand the 3 or 4 different levels of Malcolm X and where Martin Luther King Jr. came from, what he was taught and brought up to believe. He went out into the world, got beat down by policemen, spit on by people. He walked miles and miles and miles for his people. And he started coming to the conclusion that, okay, while nonviolent is a great way to go about it, in the words of Malcolm X, if somebody's cursing at you in French, you can't go speaking American and expect them to understand what you're talking about. You'd have to say it right back in French.
Speak that language.
So Martin Luther King Jr. was starting to come around to that way of thinking, And Malcolm X was going more from a black exclusive to, I have brothers of every race, colors, creed, nationalities.
Right.
So we should all be able to come together. I believe they were going from a strictly black front to a united third world front, where it's proletariat versus the establishment, the banking communities, the politics, and all that.
That's a very good analysis. Keep in mind, people my age were living during that time, and we saw that, and you have a very good perception because you weren't born when Dr. King was active, were you?
No, sir.
30, yeah, because that's been, but he's been dead how long?
He's been dead for
how many years?
almost 40.
40 some years?
Yes, sir.
How many years has Dr. King been dead, gentlemen? About
He died in 68, 69,
68.
78, 88, 98, 08. So almost 40, between 40 and 50 years.
Yeah, close to 50 years. Yeah, close to 50 years. So, yeah, those of us who are my age, we lived through that, and of course, you did an excellent analysis because from reading and hearing. But
I've been to the Lorraine Motel, the Civil Rights Museum.
Yeah.
Like I've said, I've gone a lot of places and done a lot of research.
We have 3 minutes.
things.
Look, what I want you to do now is speak directly to young people, because today, especially the African American, we have so many dying and unnecessarily incarcerated, teenagers having babies, and females can't have the babies by themselves.
Right.
What would you say to them in the next 2 minutes that might help to change that?
Well, one thing, you might not agree with the Bible or who wrote it or where it's coming from, but there's a lot of knowledge in that book. One of the greatest things I could tell them out of that book is, with all thy getting, seek knowledge. That knowledge turns to wisdom, and wisdom leads you on the road to a better understanding. And that's all we're looking for, is better growth, development, and understanding.
That's very good, because you remind me of my basic philosophy here with this program, is to talk to our ministers. I believe the only salvation America has, but my special interest is the African American community, which is behind all of the other communities,
Yes, sir.
is the church.
Right.
And the leadership of our ministers. That's why I jump on that. We got to get our ministers. We got to strengthen our ministers.
That's what I love about the AME Church. I went and read the actual book, and one of their tenets, we're going out and we're seeking to find the lost, not just black, not just white, not just brown, the lost, the people that are lost, struggling, hungry, tired, giving you're poor, you're tired, you're weak, and these are for who I speak. This is why I do what I do, and I live my life a different way just because I have that knowledge.
Very good. We have 1 minute. I'm going to give it to you. What can you say? We're still talking about that analogy of the Bible is wonderful.
Yes, sir.
What would you say to the pastors? They have so much influence.
I would
and power,
say
don't
that there are people incarcerated, and there are people that are struggling and hungry that are willing. They're willing to do something to better not only their lives, but the lives of their families. We just have to be there to give them the time. We have to understand the come as you are mode. Sometimes people don't have suits. Sometimes people don't have education, and they can't talk to you correctly because they don't know. You have to take the time out and really get to these people, because I've been in the jails. I've been in the insane asylums. I've been everywhere. These people really want help. We're not on the bottom and struggling because it's a lot of fun. There's no other choice. But we need our ministers, our pastors, and our teachers to come out and give us that. Give us just a little spark. You reminded me of a elderly gentleman that back in the day didn't finish the third reader, but he had so much wisdom. He said, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be the biggest fool I can be today. Right. He said, they just don't know any better. They got to be taught. So you got a good point there. Each one teach one. Yeah, let us stop on that. Nice to pat you. Okay. Thank you for having me.